Welcome to Curd and Vine. We're two brothers who live across the country from one another, and when we hang out, we like to geek out about wine and cheese. Tommy is a graduate of the prestigious French Culinary Institute in New York City and a certified cheese professional. I, on the other hand, am a total amateur. I'm just here to learn. On this show, we explore the fascinating world of wine, cheese, and any other food or beverage with a rich and interesting history. We take a practical approach, breaking these topics down to their simplest form to get at the root of what makes these foods and beverages so special. Today we're going to be talking about the differences between cow, sheep, and goat cheese. Hey Tommy, how's it going?
Pretty well. How you doing, Rob?
I'm great.
Good,
So
good.
today we're going to be talking about the differences between cow, sheep, and goat cheese, which I
Yeah.
think is a kind of a cool topic because these are, relatively widely available,
The
even
big,
though I think most people really only think about cow cheese when you think about cheese, right?
yeah. But if you were to think of the other ones, that's pretty much the list is going to stop at sheep and goat, with the really small other exceptions. But yeah, those are the big ones.
But there are other kinds of cheese, right? You can
Yeah.
theoretically make cheese from any.
Technically, any mammal produces milk, and you can make cheese out of any milk. I don't know if you'd want to, but you could.
Cool. Are there what's the weirdest cheese that you've
Uh,
ever?
Water buffalo.
Okay.
Like that have had water buffalo. I was surprised, but yeah, I guess it's been a thing in Italy for a couple centuries, and it's mostly like mozzarellas and burrata and stuff. But it tastes a lot like cow. Actually, I was surprised. I thought it would taste really different, but it's very very similar to cow.
Interesting. I actually have one with me here today.
All right.
I have a sample of cow, sheep, goat, and water buffalo cheese that I happened to get at my local cheese shop down the street. So I think maybe later on I'll do a little taste test after we talk about kind of what differences we expect.
Yeah.
So where did this come from? Why are these three animals the
Right.
most common?
So they were domesticated first. They were, I guess it was actually sheep and goat had a little bit of a lead on cow. Maybe by 1 to 2 thousand years.
So we're talking like thousands of years ago is when
Like
cheese was
10,000 years ago, like a really when people started farming, basically.
okay. So
Yeah.
cheese has been made as long as people have been farming.
Pretty much, yeah.
We can obviously kind of, this is a big topic on its own, but like broadly speaking, like how is cheese made, I guess.
Right. So I guess the most standard way of making cheese is you have your milk, and then you're gonna have rennet, which comes from a calf's stomach because it has a lot of enzymes, and you let it gently, very very gently heat, and then you form your curds. So you get, it's these solid bits and these liquid bits that form out of the what had just been liquid milk. And you strain out the curds, the solid parts. You leave behind the whey. And with the curds, you'll salt them, you press them. Depending on what you're doing with it, that might just be it. But you could age them for a little bit, for a long time. But yeah, that's cheese.
Can you make any style of cheese out of any kind of milk?
I don't see why not. I mean, I've seen, cheddar cheese. You usually think cow's milk, but I've seen sheep and goat cheddars. Blue cheese. I've even had a water buffalo milk blue. I don't see why you couldn't make any style out of any milk. The things that are unique to certain styles, like Penicillium camemberti, that's your bloomy, kind of looks like a paper. That white mold on brie and camembert. That doesn't only like cow's milk. It likes milk just in general.
Okay.
Same with the Penicillium roqueforti, the blue cheese mold. It doesn't really seem to care if it's cow or sheep or goat or whatever. It just likes eating lactose.
Okay. So there are, there's no technical limitation as to why you wouldn't be able to make a certain style of cheese,
Exactly.
another kind of milk, but there may be stylistic reasons, right? Like where maybe the
Right.
flavor of a certain milk lends itself to a certain style of cheese. Do you think that's probably what's going on? Why we see
That's fair to say
out there?
too. And I think a lot of it came down to availability. Like Spain has a lot of their cheeses, or Spain and Italy, a lot of their cheeses are sheep milk. So if you have more sheep around, you're going to do more sheep of all varieties. And it's not because they couldn't do cow or they didn't want to do cow. It was probably just made more sense.
Yeah. So like when I'm at a restaurant and I see the menu says goat cheese, that's a specific style. That's not just goat cheese,
Yeah,
right?
usually it's kind of it's a little confusing. It's like saying Swiss cheese.
Hmm.
It's like, well, Swiss. I mean, technically, does that mean all cheese is from Switzerland? Well, no, no. Goat cheese usually means fresh goat milk cheese, or the style is called. I'm going to butcher it, but it's the French word is chèvre,
Yeah. Okay.
um, which I think the word just means goat, but it's come to mean a specific style, which usually comes in a log.
Uh huh.
It's kind of crumbly. It's creamy, kind of sour. It's made similar to feta, and I think one of like the oftentimes you'll see it it's like in a salad, maybe with like beets or like candied walnuts or something. But yeah, goat cheese without any qualifiers is fresh goat cheese.
Okay, that's interesting.
Just like Swiss cheese without any qualifiers is Emmentaler.
Okay.
You know, the cheese with like the holes in it,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you know, you put it on a sandwich and it melts nice.
Yeah. Okay. And then you said that in Spain and Italy there are a lot of sheep cheeses. Can you give me an example of like one?
Yeah, so Spain, I think the big one would be Manchego.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Um,
I've had manchego. I love it. I just didn't know that was a sheep cheese. That's interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Spanish manchego has to be sheep, but I think like a Mexican style manchego can be cow's milk,
Interesting. Okay.
and it tends to be a little softer too.
Okay. So I think, this might be a good kind of segue into like what are the flavor differences between
Right.
these different kinds of cheeses?
I guess let's start with cow. I feel like that's the big one, the most familiar. I guess it's the most neutral flavor. That's probably the first cheese everyone has.
Yeah.
It's considered less gamey than sheep and goat, which is kind of a hard word to pin down. But so gamey kind of refers to animals that might be more wild sometimes. Like so, it's like venison is a good example.
Uh-huh.
Usually, gamey meats sometimes they can be higher in iron or they might be leaner because of their diet. There's richer in grasses and like flowers and stuff like that, and there's going to be no grain in their diet. I think a good example, would be like if you have like a lamb chop or a lamb shank or something. There's a very specific kind of earthy, irony quality to it that you don't get from cow, you don't get from chicken, you don't get from fish, you don't get from pork, but you would get it from lamb, you would get it from goat.
Yeah, I think you're right. Lamb is a very distinctive kind of taste. Goat as well, but I think lamb's probably a little more common, at least in Western cuisine. I know. I remember I made a 5 pound leg of lamb for Easter one year. I had leftovers for like
Right.
a week, and
Yeah.
after that, I was like, I don't want to have lamb again for like 3 months because it has a very distinct taste.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, and so the qualities, this gaminess quality that you can taste in meat, cow meat versus sheep meat, it's similar in the milk, right? It kind of comes
Yeah.
through.
I don't know exactly why, but it's not limited to the meat. It's the same flavor. You get that in the milk as well.
Okay, cool. Well, as I mentioned earlier, I actually have a couple samples here I have a cow cheese, I have a sheep cheese, a goat cheese, and a water buffalo cheese that they happen to
Yeah.
have at my local store. So it's funny that you mentioned that earlier. But I tried to get four cheeses that were all the same style or as close to the same style
Mhm.
as possible, trying to keep the variables as minimal as possible. The cow, sheep, and goat cheeses are all from France, and
Okay.
the water buffalo cheese is from Italy. But they're all a double cream, like soft cheese style. Can you tell me a little bit about like what that means? Like, what is a double
Yeah.
cheese?
So a double cream. It's kind of like with beer, like Belgian beers. There's singles, doubles, and triples.
Hmm.
And with those, the single, double, triple with beers, it's in reference to how strong the alcohol content is.
Okay.
With cheeses, it has to do with the fat content.
Oh, okay.
Or so, for example, I forget what the thresholds are, but it's actually like a distinct cutoff of like if you were to remove all the water and you're just dealing with carbs, proteins, and fats, it has to do with the fat content at that point.
Okay.
Like that, it's called the fat and dry matter. But yeah, so double cream has a small amount of cream added to it before they make the cheese. Triple cream has a little bit more added back to it. Whereas a single cream, you could just be making that from Just
Well,
you're not adding any extra cream. Just just using your milk.
and so
Uh,
most like a cheddar or a parmesan or like any like most cheeses that you think of, if it doesn't specify, is going to be a single
Single.
cream.
Yeah, and I guess it's also worth mentioning that I mean you really only see the word single cream, double cream, triple cream with things in the brie family.
Hmm. So I think what I'll do now is I'll just try each one and I'll just kind of let you know what my impressions are. To your earlier comment, this is really these are just like bries, right? Different kinds of brie,
Yeah,
basically.
they're all in that brie family.
Okay.
So I'm guessing they all have a the rind on the outside is this like bright white kind of. It looks somewhat like snowy, kind of like paper.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, that looks accurate. They all look about the same. The sheep one actually has interestingly a slightly orange rind.
oh yeah,
All right, I'm gonna try the cow cheese first.
yeah. So it's a French double cream, right?
Hmm.
So I'm guessing it's like buttery, creamy, maybe a little like mushroomy, a little oniony, maybe slight sweetness to it, but probably more acidic than sweet.
Yeah, that sounds perfectly. That perfectly describes that cheese. Yeah, it's really good. It tastes a lot like. I mean, it's like a brie.
Mhm.
It's a very kind of familiar taste. I've had a bunch of brie over the
Right,
years, so I think that like this is very much. I think all of them are a little different, obviously, but this one very much kind of fits in that.
exactly what you're
Yeah,
expecting. Yeah,
cool. I'm gonna try the sheep next.
yeah. So I'm guessing this one's going to be a little bit more pungent, maybe a bit more funky, just stronger in general, maybe. Um,
I would say it's compared to the cow, it's definitely a little gamier. It kind of tastes like a little lammy, honestly.
oh yeah,
There's like even a little aftertaste that kind of reminds me of, like after I've had lamb, which, is not surprising because it's, the same animal.
yeah,
But it is surprising in a way because it's milk and it's not meat, right? So it's cool that
right,
there are kind of shared characteristics between the cheese and the meat. Okay, I'm gonna try the goat.
yeah. So me personally, I'm for whatever reason very sensitive to a lot of goat milk cheeses, especially the younger, softer, fresher ones. So I really, really taste it. That goaty flavor for me is especially strong. Um, so for you, it might be actually milder than the sheep, but I can guarantee you that would be really, really strong, really gamey, really pungent for me.
I agree. Yeah, it kind of just tastes like the cow is the mildest. The sheep is a
Mm,
little gamier, and then the goat is like if you took the gaminess of the sheep and just like went even further. But
right.
they kind of seem like they're like kind of along the same spectrum. Just
Yeah, it's a very similar. Like the sheep and the goat have a very similar flavor.
yeah,
Yeah, and I agree. It's I don't know what it's called in sheep milk cheeses, but in goat milk, that goaty flavor is you can attribute it to caproic acid.
okay,
It provides just it's a goaty flavor. It's present in the meat. It's present in the milk. And I googled it recently, and I was surprised to learn that it's also in vanilla.
really.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. All right, last one. I'm gonna try the buffalo.
All right. So I'm guessing it's actually not going to be that gamey. And I mean they're all double cream, so I can't say it's going to be fattier than the other ones. Buffalo milk is fattier than cow's milk, but when you're making a triple cream, you're not just using the straight milk. You're you're supplementing it with cream. So at that point you can't really tell what's fattier than what.
I I mean my impression is that it tastes a lot like the cow. It's slightly different. I think it is fattier. I'll ask you a little bit about what that means and how that would
Mhm.
manifest in a cheese. But to me, it almost tastes like buttery. Like
Mhm.
like butter's really rich, and butter is very fatty. And this is also like if you take the cow one and just make it like creamier and richer, but not
Right.
necessarily like the flavor isn't necessarily as gamey as the sheep or certainly the goat.
Right. It just feels maybe like on your tongue. It's like, oh, this feels heavier. It feels maybe oilier.
Yeah.
Um, it coats your tongue more. Um, yeah, like you said, it's more buttery, more just heavy.
I think honestly, the buffalo might have been my favorite of the bunch. That was really interesting. Yeah,
Very cool.
that's I'd never. Well, I mean, I probably would have picked it up because I like weird, weird and
Right.
unusual stuff. But like, I never would have thought that they would have commercially made, or made water buffalo cheese in large quantities. So,
You see, like you drive around long enough, you're gonna see a cow
mhm.
or a sheep or a goat, but I've never seen like a ranch with water. I just never thought about it.
Maybe you need to go to a ranch in Italy, right? Maybe they
Yeah,
have
I
water
guess.
buffalo ranches. Um, that was cool. Yeah, like this is a really interesting exercise just to try and understand kind of like what trying to keep everything else as equal as possible,
Right,
given
right, right.
given what we have available. Uh, like what really makes a cow milk, a sheep milk a sheep milk, and a goat milk, and that was I think this is a really cool exercise.
So another interesting thing about all the different milks, so cow, sheep, goat, water buffalo, uh, they're going to have slightly different nutritional qualities.
Okay.
The ratio of carbs, proteins, fats isn't going to be the same across the board. Cows, for example, are going to be relatively lean. The cow milk it's going to have a little bit less fat relative to the other stuff. Sheep is going to be the of the big three. Is going to be the fattiest. Water buffalo, while it tastes a lot like cow, but you're saying, oh, it tastes a little creamier. Water buffalo is fattier than cow. But yeah, to break it down, sheep is relatively fattier than goat, which is really close. Goat is really close to cow, but depending on the breed, it can be a little fattier.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd say, yeah, in order of fattiness, it goes sheep, goat, cow.
That's interesting because I wasn't really paying attention to the fattiness. I guess my focus was on the flavor primarily,
Right, right.
but they also were texturally kind of different. So I think that the fat would have contributed to kind of like how
Right.
creamy and rich.
It's interesting because it's while it's I'm saying fat, and fat is a pretty broad umbrella. There are different fats, there are different proteins, there's different um, carbohydrates, more or less, and you're also dealing with a double cream. So this is a cheese that they've taken the milk and then they've purposefully set aside some cream, and then they've purposely put it back together to have an intentional amount of fat. So judging based, I think the truest way to tell the difference would just to take a sip of all the milks, which I've never done. I don't know exactly how you go about that.
I think that also brings up an interesting point, which is that there aren't a lot of ingredients in cheese, right?
No,
The milk is by far the most prevalent ingredient. Like there's a little bit of salt, as you mentioned, and
easily, yeah.
the rennet is
It's
really just there to kind of like it's like to promote the development of the cheese, but it's not
right.
exactly like anything that enters the flavor profile. Because I think I've had ice creams. There's a lot of really good ice cream in New England, and I think that you can really tell if you get milk from a creamery that's really really good milk. Usually,
Oh
the ice
yeah.
cream is going to be really really good too, because it's no surprise. Like the milk is by far the majority ingredient in the ice cream. So I think,
There's nothing to hide it behind.
yeah,
You don't have all the flavors to mask it with or other texture. It's just like I think a vanilla ice cream is maybe the best way to judge the quality of different companies, right? Because
yeah,
there's very little going on, so you can't mask quality.
yeah. Going in a completely different direction here.
Yeah.
So I know, it's pretty common to pair wine with cheese. So I'm wondering, I think like there are definitely different styles of cheese that would pair well with styles of wine, right?
Of
Like
course. Yeah.
you might, want to have a different kind of wine with a cheddar than you would with camembert or something.
Right. Right.
Couldn't tell you what the right ones are. That's obviously something you know a lot more about. But in the context of this discussion, we have different animals, different kinds of milk that produce different kinds of cheeses. So, like,
Right.
is there a way you'd think about how to pair wines with a cow milk versus a cow milk cheese versus a goat milk cheese versus a sheep milk cheese?
Yeah. Absolutely. if I know nothing else about the cheeses other than it's cow, sheep, and goat, I would be more inclined to pair with reds with the sheep and the goat.
So why would you choose a red for the sheep and the goat over the cow?
It kind of comes down to the gaminess.
Okay.
It's a strong flavor. And I think just in general, the kind of your textbook pairings come down to the bigger and bolder the cheese, then the bigger and bolder the wine you're going to want to pair with it.
Gotcha.
And in general, there are exceptions, but in general, red wines, like for example, a Cabernet Sauvignon is going to be a lot bigger, bolder, more flavorful, more in your face than like a Sauvignon Blanc.
Okay. That makes sense. So you really want to, otherwise the cheese could overpower the wine.
Right. You don't want one to overpower the other. You kind of want to match intensity.
Okay. So then on the flip side of that, if you have a cow cheese, it's like knowing nothing else about what style of cheese it is, you'd be more likely to recommend a white wine with the cow cheese.
Right. Like, for example, if someone's saying, oh, I have some mozzarella, what's a good wine with that? I'd say super, super light white wine.
Yeah.
Something really delicate. Because the mozzarella is it's got a very subtle flavor. You'd want something mild to go with that. So I would think of maybe like a really light floral white, maybe like a Viognier would be nice. Sauvignon Blanc might be nice. I guess a good extreme example for cow, maybe let's say it's like Parmigiano Reggiano. Super sharp, super salty, really flavorful, really bold. I would go with a red wine. Another good point to bring up is that so red wines, any skin contact wine, but for the most part that's going to be red wines, have tannins. So you might notice this when you drink a Cab or a Syrah, where your tongue kind of puckers a little bit, and it's maybe a little stringent, maybe a little bit bitter. What can really help cut that and make that more enjoyable and just tasty is salt. Okay. You're going to find more salt in hard cheese. They're just more dense.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons why the hard cheeses play nice with the big reds.
Interesting. Well, maybe for a future episode, we'll have to do this kind of discussion in a more scientific test, as it were.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Yeah,
we could have, a mild cheese and a strong cheese, and then a mild wine and a strong wine, and do kind of like the 4 different combinations, and just see how.
Yeah.
Does the wine overpower the cheese? Does the cheese overpower the wine? Or is it, can you match them equally? But yeah, this has been a lot of fun. I've learned a ton. I think, there's really no substitute for actually tasting them. So
yeah.
Is it relatively easy? I mean, the water buffalo is probably a little harder.
That's the hardest one to get a hold of. But cow, sheep, goat, these days, very easy to get a hold of. You go to your local grocery store.
Well, this has been a lot of fun, and looking forward to the next one.
Let's get scratching.